everyone, it's been a while. Welcome back to another video. My name is Fiona and I am an artist and illustrator based in the Pacific Northwest. I feel like it's been a couple months since I've last posted a video, and I've actually been in the process of graduating. For those of you who don't know, I was in school to get my bachelor's of art in illustration, was my major, and this last semester was my final semester. And so I'm graduated, I'm done. The way that the school system is set up is that we have a thesis project, and that's our final project. And it's a lot of work, takes a lot of time, but I learned a lot about myself throughout the process of it, and learned a lot about like how I work as an artist. There was that high of finishing thesis and graduating, and then a crash, a burnout. And it wasn't until just a week or so ago that I was finally able to kind of claw my way out of it and get back into making art. So for this video, I thought that I would kind of go through a little bit with some updates, how my thesis went, show you some of the work that I made during that process, and then also just some little updates since then of how, what I've been getting into with art and a couple fun new materials. And I also have an exciting announcement or some exciting news to share, so stick around till the end of the video and I will talk about that. All right, so I was looking through some of my paintings and I realized that I'm missing one, but that's okay. I'll be able to insert some photos from my thesis show so you can get a better picture. But so the theme of my work was based around memory and my relationship with my grandmothers, and specifically their ties together, and how they were both landscape architects. They had a love for the land and the little things in life, the little joys in life. So I spent basically the whole of last year working on this project, and I decided to do a series of paintings because I think that that feels right for me. Like, it's kind of that middle ground between illustration and painting, or fine art, and how they can overlap and how they can be the same. And so I did 3 7x10 paintings for part of it. And one second, actually, I'm gonna go get my initial sketches because I wanted to show you these first, but when I had a hard time loosening up. And so throughout this process, I was able to loosen up my work. Okay, so I was struggling with the process of loosening up, and I wanted to show you a couple of the first renditions of some of the work that I did. I did this as kind of the idea that I would make a sticker sheet for my thesis. This was for a different class. So I was working on shape design and how I wanted my image language to look. And while I did like how these turned out, and I actually did use some of these as individual stickers, one of my friends helped me print them. So I used this one, and this one, I think, for the stickers that I ended up having as like little freebies. It's important to look back at the initial stages of a project and be able to recognize what you gained from it. So maybe while I shifted throughout, I was able to still gain something from this. And some of that shape language showed up in a few of my first renditions. So I then did these, which fortunately my cat did rip some of this, but it's to be expected, I suppose. So these were my first 2 attempts, and I didn't dislike these. I think that there's some really great things happening here. Like I tried to include some collage, and I love this little bunny detail. And this was the first one. But when I was painting, I felt really tight and like closed up and like tense. And I didn't really feel like, I feel like when I was painting this, it was almost like I was painting what I thought I should paint or what was expected of me. And there's nothing wrong with this work, but it didn't maybe fully feel like me. And this was the second one I did. And I feel like I was kind of moving in a direction like that was slightly looser. Like I was like leaving some textures here, experimenting a little bit down here with layering watercolor over colored pencil. But I had my midterm review, and there's kind of a general consensus that I basically needed to loosen up more. And I know that that's such a classic kind of cliche, like artist trope. It's like, oh, I need to loosen up. There is nothing wrong with being tight. And one of my teachers actually told me this. And so I feel like ultimately it's just about finding what feels right for you. And for me personally, this wasn't feeling like the feeling that I wanted to evoke wasn't really showing up here. Fast forward, I decided that I would just sit down on the floor one night and I painted some butterflies. This might not all show up in frame, but let's see if I can get it. So this is a much bigger piece, so sorry it's a little hard to fit in the frame. So I did one before this that I have actually gotten rid of because I needed to declutter my closet. It was becoming a crazy monster, but you can get the idea. I decided to just take as many materials as were around me, and I would just continue to layer and layer up my work and up the materials to create depth and texture. And I kind of realized like there's not one way that your art needs to function. There's lots of ways to be an artist, and there's things that I appreciate in other people's work that I feel like I wasn't allowing for myself. And that was not being perfect. You know, the background isn't perfectly lining up with the butterflies. There's some overlapping, there's some pencil marks, textures, like all of these things make up what it feels like for me to create work. And just throughout this process, I realized sometimes I get frustrated. I'll put down a first layer and it won't go as planned, and that really frustrates me. That doesn't mean that your work is messed up or that you've ruined it. Like, you can still work on it and keep trying, and it will turn into something that maybe you didn't even expect. So there was that. So then I started this series of individual butterflies because I decided that I would, create this body of work. And throughout the process, I learned a lot. And there were some that I like more than others, for sure. And actually, some of the first ones I did were these two. And this one I was really feeling frustrated. I could not get it how I wanted it to look, and but I kept adding layers. And it doesn't really feel like this one necessarily fully fits with the rest, but I decided to include it just because it was part of my process. And then this one kind of developed this new shape language of abstraction and butterflies. So I continued that on, and what worked, what didn't. I used a lot of soft pastel, colored pencil, gouache, and watercolor. I would say my favorites are these three. I just love the color. This is probably my favorite one. But there's just some of this like ethereal quality that I wanted because it's about memory and childhood and relationships and piecing together the views that we have of people. And I feel like this really captured it. So that was kind of the next, step in that process. And then that's how these kind of started developing. And this looseness, this watercolor, soft pastel layering effect. And I learned a lot. And I had one more, but I'm really sad. I do not know where it is. But hopefully I'll find it. Hopefully it's around somewhere. But I then went into, and this piece is going to be much too large to be able to fit fully, so I'll insert a picture. But this is very long. I was inspired by the French Bayeux tapestry and how the narratives are told. And so I decided to incorporate some of these borders and these creatures because I was kind of leaning into the theme of tea parties, small joys, playfulness, and gardens. And so I started adding these characters and experimenting and layering and layering and layering. Of course, trying to fight the urge to, tighten up or worry about mistakes. But in that process, I learned that I really like these soft pastel techniques. And with a lot of, I use some soft pastels and then soft pastel pencils as well. So this was the next piece in that puzzle. I realized that there was something missing in my installation. And so I decided, I was messing around with vellum, and I started to wonder about transparencies and how memories are layered and things are, hidden over time or revealed, and I'll again put pictures, but I incorporated these, and imagine this being on a white background. And I incorporated these vellum drawings along with the butterflies. And this final piece I wanted to include, but I was actually working on in another class and I wasn't able to get it done. But it kind of all culminated into one piece. And again, this is a bit long, but all of the work that I was doing throughout the semester culminated kind of into this piece. And there's things I like and I don't like, and I need to be much more meticulous about spraying with fixative. But I hated this piece initially, the first layers, but I just committed to keeping going and powering through and just trying to explore and have curiosity with myself and with my process and the materials. And at the end, I decided to add these vellum pieces. So I glued them on, and you can see the shape of the vellum, but it kind of hides itself. And, some parts I drew over the vellum to kind of incorporate it more. But I really love how this turned out. And overall, I feel like my thesis was such a transformative experience and just really taught me about creating. And I think after thesis ended and just I felt so burnt out because I was so nervous and scared of what I've been in school for so long. I'm 31 and I'm just now getting my undergraduate degree. I was at school before when I turned 18 and graduated high school and all that, but I just never really knew what I wanted to do. And I kind of jumped around from different majors and, inevitably took a break from school. And, 3.5 years ago, I went back to school and I'm just now getting my degree. And it was such a relief that I feel like I almost no longer knew who I was anymore, in a way. Like I did, because I had just spent so much time, learning and on how I work and making this body of work. But through that, it was almost just like such a high that I just crashed and burned and just got really almost depressed, really. And I have some like medical stuff or just some health stuff that it's all just kind of tied together and feeds off each other. But I'm finally starting to find that routine again, find that routine post school and figure out, what do I want now that I'm not in school? Because when you're in school in art, you're told what to paint to some degree, obviously. You have assignments and due dates, and now I'm not in that environment anymore, and I have to create my own due dates, create my own timetable, discover what is it that I actually want. But I'm going to switch the camera around. So, as I was saying, I just trying to figure out what is it that I want out of this life as an artist. And I'm starting to kind of figure it out, and it's a process. It's hard. I don't think anybody fully knows, but I learned tools. I came away from thesis, from school, from all of that with tools to figure it out. And that fear of like, what if I never make it as an artist? What if I never make it as an illustrator? What if I never publish a picture book or sell my work? Or what if? And that just consumed me. And I think like that was, I kind of halted my momentum temporarily. So at the end of my school, right before I graduated, I found out that I was accepted into a group show here in Portland. And it's a show called the 5x5 show. All the work is 5 inches by 5 inches. For so long, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I put so much pressure on myself. We had about, like a month and a half to work on the pieces. You could submit up to 5. I ended up thinking 4, and that's what I did. But I spent so much time, wondering like, oh, this has to be so good. This is my first show ever, my first professional show that's not in school. And I'm on this high of school, and I just had that crash and had that burnout. And so I stopped knowing, like, I can literally paint anything. There's no teachers giving me feedback, and I just struggled so much. And so I just needed to break out of it and just kind of sat down and started doodling. I started with some butterflies, and this didn't really work out because I was kind of out of practice at that point. I mean, it really hadn't been that long, but it just goes to show, like, you can really get into momentum, and then it's kind of like working out, I guess, like you kind of need to build that muscle back. I just did some pieces, and I have some pictures, I'll put on the screen here. I think while there was a lot of stress surrounding this gallery and like doing the art, it almost saved me. And I'm so thankful for it because I got that opportunity to complete something on my own and do that on my own. And I have friends in the show who I met at school, and to have that opportunity together is just so special. And it forced me to continue, because if there's no deadlines and no art school to force me to do art, then I'm just left with like, who am I? And I'm really excited. The show is in a week about from now. I don't know if anything will sell, but it's just the principle of it, I had that experience. I learned how to hang, wood cradled panels. I went to the hardware store and braved that experience. They're very nice, but, just very out of my comfort zone. And I'm just so happy that I had one of my teachers from school is during the show, and some of my friends are in it. And so having that kind of like safety net in a way before fully going out on my own was just so nice. But yeah, all this to say, I've kind of slowly been pulling myself out of, this crazy whirlwind couple of years of being in art school. And I just wanted to, where I've been, what's been happening. And I'm very much excited to be making more videos for you all. I've gone on a bit of a spending spree of sorts of some art materials, fun new stuff. So in my next video, I will be showing you all that. Yeah, just some exciting new things. One thing I did want to share, I've had it for a while, but I haven't actually used it. And it is this tube ringer. Yeah, tube ringer. When I tell you, this was so satisfying to finally use. I'm like, why has this been sitting in my cupboard for so long? Also, I did also just find this too. I found it on Facebook Marketplace. I don't know if they've discontinued these IKEA drawers, but I had them when I was a kid. And they are amazing. And I found one for half off in amazing condition, like 10 minutes away from me. So I think that that was, you know, meant to be, because they haven't sold them. They haven't had them listed on IKEA for ages. Anyways, I digress. So I got this, and I have one of my favorite greens is Cobalt Green by Schminke. Love Schminke. But sometimes their watercolor tubes are just super annoying to get the lids on. I don't know, but their paint is amazing. But I found that the Cobalt I've had it for like a couple years, and it's kind of not like hardened, but it's kind of like stiffened up a little bit or something. So it was really hard to get the paint out, and it's like perfectly usable. But I think it's just maybe the Cobalt colors. But I used this, and it was amazing. It was so easy to use. It was perfect. Highly recommend. I feel like this will save a lot of money for your paint, even though it is like, I don't know if it's like $35 or thereabouts, but it is really legit, and it can fit acrylic, like larger acrylic paint as well, or paint tubes. So yes, I highly recommend that. That's kind of about all I wanted to share with you all. This is just kind of an explanation for where I've been, a reminder to, you know, keep going, accept or embrace the little wins. And actually, one of my thesis mentor told me that it's good if you find that thing that keeps you going, no matter what it is with art, like just hold on to that. And like, even if you make renditions of like the same thing, it's keeping that momentum. And so something that's helped me, obviously like the butterflies have helped me, and I've continued on with that. But another thing is birds. So here, just a quick little, you know, I'm going to dive more in depth on this sketchbook later on, because I'm kind of still working on it. I'm working in a couple different sketchbooks. This is an Etcher hot press sketchbook, and then I have this Piff, I don't know what size this is. It's like not the teeniest one, but the one above it, and working between those. So I've been drawing some birds, a lot of mixed media with a few fun materials that I will talk about in next week's video. And then I did some of these, figuring out kind of materials that I am liking and how they lend itself to different textures. But they still weren't necessarily feeling like me. And then I did this one last night, and I feel like this one felt a little bit more like me, like with the watercolor layering and stuff. And as I was painting it, I was just thinking, I love watercolor, it's so amazing. And I just love all the colors that it can make, and like the transparency, and that's what I'm used to. I think I tried to use gouache the other day, and it was interesting. I just hadn't used it for a while, and I used to use gouache a lot, but it almost feels like kind of clunky after having used watercolor so much, and like soft pastels, which are all these transparent mediums. And the way that I have used gouache lately, when I do use it, is kind of just really transparently. And my favorite gouache color, one of my favorite colors just ever, is the Miyasodis Blue. It's one of the Holbein Iridori gouache colors, but it is amazing, and it's just this gorgeous soft blue color, and I love like mixing it into my watercolors, because it kind of creates this kind of grayed down, like misty effect. I wanted to give you all that explanation for where I've been and an update, and just to share my excitement for moving forward. Thank you all if you've made it this far. I really appreciate you watching and joining me in my studio. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Bye.